Let's take a look at our first example. We've got 3 and 5/10 plus 4 and 7/10. Now my first step is to make an estimate of this. So I'm going to round to whole numbers because that's an easy way to make an estimate in my head. I got to follow my rules for rounding. So 3 and 5/10 would round up to 4 because anything 5 and higher tells me to round up. 4 and 7/10 would round up to 5. So I'm thinking in my head, 4 plus 5 equals 9. So my answer should be somewhere in the ballpark of 9. Alright, step 2 is to line up your numbers so that each place value is lined up. Sometimes you'll have to rewrite the problem. Other times it'll already be written for you, like in this case. But you still need to check, is it lined up properly? Do I have my ones over my ones, my decimal points lined up, my tenths lined up? Absolutely. So here we're ready to begin adding. Step 3, add away. We're going to start with the smallest place value, so on the right side, and add each column one by one. Now, 5 plus 7 is 12, of course. So here's an example where I need to remember my rules for regrouping. I'm going to put the 2 down, and I'm going to carry the 110 up to the next column. Then I'm going to add my ones. 1 plus 3 plus 4 is 8. And the last step is to be sure you've got commas and decimal points where needed. Okay, here we've got our decimal point. It's lined up with the others. This looks great. So my answer is 8 and 2/10. Now the last step is for me to check to make sure that's reasonable. I estimated 9. Does 8 and 2/10 seem reasonable for that? You bet it does. It's in the ballpark of 9. Let's take a look at example number 2. Again, make sure you're copying these into your notes. Okay, well, step 1, I need to make an estimate. 7 and 9/10. I'm going to round that to 8. Plus 5 and 74 thousandths. I'm going to round that to 5 if I follow my rounding rules. Remember, 5th graders, when you read numbers with decimals, I say "and" for the decimal point, and then I look at what I've got after the decimal point, and I say that number as if it were a number all by itself. So this is the number 74. So I say 5 and 74. And then I need to tack on the place value of my last digit. So my 4 is my last digit, and it is in the thousandths place. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So I read this number 5 and 74 thousandths. And rounding that to the nearest whole number is 5. So I'm thinking 8 plus 5 equals 13. My answer should be somewhere in the ballpark of 13. Well, let's add it up. Second step, line up my numbers. Now, let's check. These are already lined up. Good way for me to see that is that my decimal points are right over the top of each other. Now, you'll notice here I've got some blanks, okay, because I have my tenths lined up, but this number doesn't have any hundredths or thousandths. You know, it's a really good idea to use zeros as placeholders if this happens, especially when we get into subtracting. So let's get in the habit of using zeros to fill in those placeholders. Third step, add away. Go to the far right side, start adding your numbers. 0 plus 4 is 4. 0 plus 0, 0. 9 plus 2, going to need to regroup. Put down the 1, carry the 1 up to the top. And 1 plus 7 plus 5, 13. Step 4, I want to make sure I've got my decimal point where I need it. Dropping it straight down. Excellent. So we got an answer of 13 and 104 thousandths. Does that answer make sense? We estimated 8 plus 5 is 13. Well, sure. This is definitely in the right ballpark. Okay, let's do one last problem. Now, I want you to solve this problem in your notes on your own. Okay, so follow the 5 steps. Go ahead and pause the video right now and solve the problem. Okay, so you've solved the problem, And hopefully you started by making a magnitude estimate. Now if I follow my rounding rules and round these to the nearest whole, I'm going to think 4 plus 3 equals 7. So my answer should be in the ballpark of 7. Next, I need to line my numbers up so that they're lined up properly. Hopefully you rewrote the problem in your notes. Okay, so I've got 4 and 465 thousandths, and I'm adding 2 and 54 hundredths to that. I need to make sure I've got each place value lined up, which means my decimals should be right over each other. Now, remember when I talked about having those empty places? This number doesn't have any thousandths, so we're going to use zeros as placeholders. Now it's time to solve. Okay, so hopefully you started with 5 plus 0, added these up. 5 plus 0 is 5, 6 plus 4 is 10, you need to regroup. 1 plus 4 plus 5 is 10 again, you need to regroup. 1 plus 4 plus 2 is 7. So when you get your answer, and I should also mention that you remember to put your decimal point in, dropping that decimal point straight down, okay, straight down below, your answer is 7 and 5 thousandths. Does that make sense? We estimated 4 plus 3 equals 7. Sure, that makes complete sense. Alright, 5th graders, that's it for this lesson. Please make sure that you have the rules for addition and your example problems in your notes.